Okay, so today is a 2011 Dodge Ram 1500 quad cab 5.7 Hemi. Customer complains running rough, stumbling, check engine light or MLI flashing, which would obviously indicate a misfire is being detected, and the scan reports P0305 misfire. So we're going to look at some recordings that I've taken. So here is the initial scan, shows P0305, cylinder misfire number 5, and low battery voltage. It's been 20 to 30 below Celsius every day here for the past week, so low battery voltage in a lot of computers. Also had a problem with the right and left turn signal lamps, both light bulbs were burnt out, but that's a minor issue. Some driver's door module codes for loss of communication. Again, probably due to low battery voltage. Some HVAC system issues that they didn't mention they had any issues with, so we're going to just record that for now. Had a look at a recording. I took a recording on a road test after I visually inspected things, and this is what the recording looks like. This is misfire counters in the system test, which cylinder is misfiring, and you can see on the road test that cylinder 5 was reporting misfires. Where was it? Under a load. Unfortunately, this recording doesn't show engine RPM. It just shows which cylinder is misfiring. But at this point, when I was, let's get rid of the sweep here, when I was accelerating, it was counting significant misfires on number 5. Now the customer has said that they've replaced the coil in number 5 already, not sure of the condition of the plugs, and I'm aware of camshaft issues that can happen on these engines, but I think we're going to pull the plugs out of that cylinder and have a look at them and possibly put a couple of plugs in there just for the sake of that being easier than going further in at first. So we'll pause this and come back after we get the plugs out. So we've got the engine cover off, and the cylinders are numbered 1357 down the driver's side and 2468 down the passenger side, kind of like a small block Chevy. And you can see the third coil on the driver's side has been replaced. It's obviously nice and clean, which is cylinder number 5. So I'm going to pull that coil off and have a look at the plugs in there. So there's the 2 plugs out of number 5 cylinder. The gap is a little wide and the ground electrode is a little bit worn, but it's not too bad. Of course, they are a little dark, but that's not uncommon today. So we're going to put a couple of fresh plugs in there, and I'm also going to move that number 5 coil to a different location, just simply to eliminate that as a possibility as well. So we replaced both plugs in number 5 cylinder and moved the number 5 coil to the location where number 1 is, just because that was convenient, just to eliminate the possibility that the new part was defective. And we're going to start it and go for a road test and record some more data and see if it still misfires. I hope not. So I'm just going to go in and clear the codes on this thing because it's got a bunch of codes in it now. And of course, with Dodge and Ram, we got to clear the codes with the key on, engine off. I've got the key in the run position right now. I'm just going to clear all codes read by code scan. The battery's a little weak in this vehicle. It started this morning, but reluctantly. So detected 15 systems and cleared codes. So we'll just go into the engine and just double check that there are no codes in here. And there aren't any. Go into system tests, and which cylinder is misfiring, and we'll have a look at misfire data on number 5. Let's graph number 5, and I'll start it up. Well, that obviously made no difference. I'm going to look at engine vacuum now that it's missing right now. So I had checked engine vacuum yesterday, but mind you, it wasn't misfiring at the time. Now I noticed that this thing seems to misfire on a cold start, as you just saw. So I've got the vacuum gauge teed into the brake booster hose, which is the central vacuum port, and I'm going to start it up and we'll see if the needle is fluctuating. Well, that certainly looks pretty damn smooth. Let me see if it's misfiring. Certainly is misfiring still, but the vacuum looks smooth, so that theoretically indicates we don't have a valve problem. But I'm not completely convinced. So we're going to have a look at the primary waveform on a number 5 ignition coil and compare it to the other coils. Rule out maybe a driver in the PCM. I have changed a computer on one of these. Mind you, mice ate the wiring, so that caused the driver failure. But if you look at the coils, there is one common wire on all 4 coils on this side, and that comes from the ASD relay. That would be 12 volt power or ignition power, and then the individual coil controls on the negative side of the coil are going right back to the PCM. So I've backpinned that blue wire on number 5 coil. Should be 12 volts when the coil is off and 0 when the coil is on. So set it up to look at this waveform with the Vantage Pro here. There's definitely a normal looking primary waveform on that circuit. Definitely looks normal. I'm going to move it to one of the other coils to compare it. There's number 1 coil. The dwell might be a little longer, but the engine RPM slowed down. So. And there's number 5 coil. So it looks the same to me. I guess we pull the valve cover off. So I started thinking about this, and I know some of you are probably already saying, well, what about the injector? An engine needs 3 things to run. Air, compression, air and compression go together, fuel and spark. Well, we've kind of eliminated the ignition side of things. The vacuum gauge indicates there isn't a valve train problem unless it's not showing it, but we haven't checked the injector. So we're going to look at the injector waveform and maybe do an injector flow test before we pull this valve cover off, because that's not 5 minutes. So let's have a look at the injector waveform. Okay, so now we're going to current ramp it. We've got a good injector looking waveform, but let's see if we can current ramp it and see the pimple bump. Well, that doesn't look very good. "10 milliseconds, it should be there." Let's try moving to another injector. Well, I got something set up wrong. Or my amp clamp battery is dead. Try again. So it turns out my amp clamp is defective. I can't get an amperage reading on a good cylinder, never mind that one. But that injector waveform is actually, or that injector is actually clicking, so I'm pretty sure that it's the drive is, or the solenoid is opening. Well, what I've done is I've installed a fuel pressure gauge and a fuel pressure adapter on the fuel rail, and I'm going to run the fuel pump using the output state controls. So the fuel pump is running just enough to build fuel pressure. Then I'm going to exit out of this test. And I'm going to go to injector number 1. And this test is going to toggle that injector on and off. So we'll look at the fuel pressure gauge as it does that, so we can see if it drops. Sorry for the glare. There, that's a little better. So I'm going to turn it on. Boy, that's not dropping at all. I would have expected fuel pressure to drop more than that. I don't believe the fuel pump's not running. The injector is being commanded on. Well, that's like 10 times and it didn't drop. So I'm going to exit out. So that test is inconclusive. I'll have to use an injector tester. Okay, so I got a fuel injector tester connected to number 2 injector, battery, power, and ground. And static pressure in the fuel rail is around 58 psi. When I press this test button, it's going to fire the injector several times, and we're going to get a pressure drop. This is number 2 cylinder. So it went from 58 down to roughly 49. So now we're going to repeat that test on number 5. So now I got the tester plugged into number 5 injector, which is a suspect cylinder. I ran the fuel pump again, and we're starting out with 58 psi. I'm going to press the test button. Exactly the same fuel delivery. Well, I don't think it's an injector problem. I guess we are pulling the valve cover off. Well, that was fun. Let's see, there are 10 valve cover bolts. Take all the coils out, disconnect the injector harnesses, disconnect the alternator harness, disconnect the AC pipes, a bolt on the bottom of the bracket for the dipstick, and then move the brake pedal and gas pedal all the way up so you can access the 4 bolts that hold the brake booster on the firewall, because you got to kind of push the brake booster off to one side to get the valve cover out of there. It's either that or evacuate the AC and recharge it, and I'm not going to do that. So now I've taken the starter relay out and I've installed a switch in here in place of the relay so that I can crank it and I can watch the rocker arms move. The closest intake valve that you see is number 3, and then number 5 intake and number 7 intake at the back. So watch what happens when I crank the engine. It's pretty obvious that number 5 intake is barely opening. Watch it again. So this thing needs a cam and lifters. Oh joy. Customer's going to be really pleased.